Hey James, good to see you again.
Good to see you too, James. It's been a little while.
It has. So, as a few people know now that we started working together, we probably it feels like months and months, but it's probably a couple of months. Um, yeah, someone on the call that we first got onto said, "Oh, how am I going to differentiate between the both of you?" And you had quite a peculiar nickname. Why don't you tell us what that nickname is and how it came about?
So people are starting to know me in Pax8 by Seahorse. They came from my playing rugby and basically playing a bit of touch at training, and I glided through the line, and one of the guys made a joke around, "You look like a seahorse when you run," and it just looks so effortless. I don't know how he covered so much ground and it just stuck. So people know me as Seahorse, and I'm starting to bring it into the professional world because, yeah, James and James, it gets bloody confusing very quick.
Yeah, it does. The elegant seahorse. I like that a lot. Yeah, it's funny because yeah, my name's James as well, but like no one really calls me James. It's usually Bergs or Bergle or JB. It's one of those names. Most people do have a nickname if they are called James. But yeah, Bergs and Seahorse. Maybe that's what we should call it.
We can start a morning talk show based on that,
That,
the dodgy
that's it.
music, and go from
That's
there.
it. That's what I have to do for the next one. Well, look, appreciate you joining again today. The next 20 minutes or so, would love to pick your very smart brain on the topic of business valuation and what MSPs and TSPs can start thinking about today that's going to impact their business valuation when they go for some sort of exit, whether that's acquisition or whether they're looking to retire, get out of the business, etc. And this is stemmed from a lot of the conversations that I'm having with partners today, and then I'm having partners come and say, "Hey, I'm considering selling my business. Do you know anyone that's looking to sell?" And I've got others that are looking to buy. And it's a great acquisition strategy. You can grow organically, or you can actually go and acquire a company. But I think about it from the perspective: if I was going to be selling my business, I've got a choice of making a little bit of money or a lot of money, and I'd probably go for the latter. So I really wanted to pick your brain with your experience and ask you what are the levers and the dials that are important in that one can put in place or adjust today that will impact that multiplier on exit. And then we can go from there. We'd love to look at what are the the considerations of multipliers. Is it EBITDA? Is it revenue? Is it recurring revenue? Etc. But we'd love to get your brain on those topics.
Well, let's take a step back because I I have a lot of these conversations as well. Um, there are more people that are looking to buy, and there's lots of people that are starting to consider to sell. Um, and for the people that want to sell, they're not quite mentally ready for it, is what I'm finding as well. There's probably a lot more actual buyers that are ready to make deals than there are sellers that are ready to make deals. And a lot of that's to do with we don't actually have an exit strategy and we don't really know what's next. So a lot of the owners have been doing this for like 20 years. Very hard graft. They're starting to get tired. Fair enough. It's a bloody tough industry. But when push comes to shove, and I see a lot of people start to get in front of buyers because there's a lot of buyers reaching out to people as well. They just like freeze up and they're not ready to do anything. And whether that's to do with they're not getting the value that they expected, they're not ready to go through the due diligence process, or they're just not ready to move on to something else. And I'm finding a lot of the times it's that end piece. If they don't know what to do next. They're still in their late 40s to late 50s at this point. They want some time off, but they're not ready to go into a next career. And it's because we haven't stopped and thought about it. Like as small business owner for 20 years, you just like go, 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 go. Well, once that's turned off, it's that's your identity for a lot of people. Like it's
Mm.
you're a small business owner. You go to the barbecues and you say when people ask what you do, like I own a MSP. I've been in this industry for 20 years. Like that's the identity. So it's a lot bigger than just money for a lot
Mm.
of people.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and for me, a lot of that mental preparation needs to start now because as soon as you start getting into the actual process to sell, even if you're just ready to sell for any price, it's never walk up, someone will buy you, and the deal's done overnight. That's not how it works. You're really signing in
mm,
for probably an 18-month process to get to the point of
mm,
a deal,
mm,
and then
mm,
most of the time you're going to have to sit there for 12, 24 months, 36 months for a buyout period as well. So
mm.
you're really talking about a 4 to 5 year period of this getting done. Now, they can happen faster, but it's
Yeah.
better to prepare for that sort of thought process. Um,
It's really interesting to hear you say that, actually, and you're right. It's so important because I've witnessed quite a lot of mergers and some acquisitions, and time again they look roses and unicorns, before it happens, and then you hear about things going sideways, and one of the parties not necessarily getting what they thought they would out of it, and there's a little bit of upset and people being disgruntled. But that's really good advice. Is don't look at this as a sell and you're out. Is what is the plan? So mentally prepare today, but also not just prepare for the exit, but the exit period.
and it's because we don't have the end in mind. So even
Mm,
for most business owners that I talk to, they don't have a
mm,
personal wealth target. They have um, they have a random idea of what they think the business is valued from the talk inside the industry, without
mm,
understanding a
mm,
lot of the context, which we'll talk a bit about shortly. Um, so they think, oh, well, potentially my $2 million revenue business is actually worth $5 million on the market, so I'll jump in and sell. And then they start to find out the reality of they're not actually worth that much. But they
mm,
also don't
mm,
know whether they need $5 million or not, because most business owners haven't planned for that retirement and the um, what their return on their business is, because we never went into the
mm,
business as an investment. It was a
mm,
it goes
mm,
back to that whole E-Myth thing of we've had skills, fell into the business, and we've grown it quite successfully. There's a lot of successful MSPs, but it's not treated as that sort of investment uh, vessel, because we just think
yeah.
in our heads, oh, we just work our ass off for 20, 30 years, and then we'll get this big
Mm,
payout and we can walk away straight away. But that's just never the reality of how this all works. So we have to be a lot more
mm,
deliberate about um,
yeah.
personal planning, and then where does the business come into that? Because that steps into the valuation piece of uh, we might want $5 million, but why? And is it realistic
Mm,
for what the
mm,
business is currently, or what I could potentially tweak to make it valued more? You might not be able to
mm,
get it to
mm,
that. So
mm,
is it more important for you to have a time period? So you might want to be aiming to get out in the next 3 years, or is it more
mm,
important
mm,
to get a certain amount of money out of the business? And that's where you can change those decision making pathways as well. Seen a lot of the $1 to $3 million MSPs that are running quite unprofitably, like the 6% EBITDA average. Instead of focusing on all this growth that isn't happening, if you consolidate the business in and make 20% profit, all of a sudden you're generating like 600K in profit each year, and then this magical $5 million sale becomes less important because you've started to generate this cash engine that you can start using.
mm,
But
mm,
it comes from that clarity of the direction and where you're trying to head. And it really comes
mm,
down to that timeline as well, because there's a big difference between
mm,
needing $5 million in a year compared to $5 million over 10 years. And
mm,
it really
mm.
reframes how you can actually plan this out a lot better.
Yeah, really, really good advice, and something good to think about. So you've got what are your financial goals and what are your personal goals? Do you want to sit on a beach and kick your feet up for the rest of your life, or do you want to pay your house off, or do you want to jump into something else? And it's a good point because I've thought about it. I'm too young to think about retiring just yet, but I thought, what would I do? And yeah, as you know, I took a little bit of time out after my time with Dado, and spent time with the baby and babysitting. And actually, I've been told it's not babysitting if it's your own child, so it's called parenting. So I did some parenting, and I realized I'm probably not a full stay-at-home dad, but I was eager to get back in and do something. And I think it's important to think about that. So, so yeah, people are jumping into a business now. Some of the people have been in it for a while. So I guess what you're recommending is, what is, like, start with the end in mind. Like, what is it that you actually want to do, not just from a business perspective, financial perspective, a life perspective? Do you want to stay in it, etc.? And really just start to create a model and a framework for what you need to, what your timeline is for what you need to have in place to achieve your goals. And then perhaps what you then do is, what for the milestones on your time frame is, what does the business need to look like at each one of them for you to optimize or maximize that exit for whatever that may be.
Yeah, and for whether you're aiming to sell, or I work with some very successful deliberate lifestyle businesses, and like when we talk about lifestyle businesses, people just think it's like you rock up, it's like a paid job type of thing. But businesses I'm talking about with deliberate lifestyles are those $3 to $5 million companies that, or even $1 to $5 million companies that have a sustainable culture. They've got good people in the business. They've got a good client base. They're just slowly, incrementally doing things better. And it's not fully reliant on the owner, but the owner's still involved. But they're generating a lot of profit. Like I've worked with many clients where I've helped them get to that nice solid position where they're earning 20 to 25, 30% EBITDA on top of a high paid salary. If you're taking that money out of the business and investing it externally, you're building up that nest egg, and the sale becomes less important. Like I've got clients that tell me directly, like they'll have hit their personal wealth target in 2 to 3 years. If they sell the business, doesn't matter, it's just bonus on top, because they're hitting their numbers and it's a lot clearer. Problem for most of us is we're stuck in this lost mindset where we're trying to grow, we didn't do it well enough, so we try and be a lifestyle business, and we keep swaying between the two. And by doing that, you're not achieving anything. If you're growing, if you're a growth business, you need to actually be growing and seeing that revenue and that those margins grow as you're actually doing it. Or if you're not able to do that, you need to focus on actually consolidating and making sure the business model is solid. And they're both very similar in some of the requirements that need to happen. Like, no matter what, the business, to get a decent value for your business, it can't revolve around you as the business owner to do everything. If you're the one doing all the sales and doing technical work and doing this and that, and if you can't go away on holiday, your business value and the multiplier is going to go right down, unless you're going to stay with the business, unless you're going to keep working there and take a paid job, which most MSP owners don't want to do. It's going to be valued very low. So developing that leadership team out, no matter what size it is, there needs to be leaders in there that are taking care of different aspects of the business. That's where one of those things, those values increase. And that's for both sides. It's not just a growth company. It's not just a deliberate lifestyle business. And that's one of the things that takes the longest to do. Everything else we're going to talk about, you can do fairly quickly when you've got the right execution practices. But leadership, if you don't have a good, experienced leadership team, it's going to take you probably 3 years to get there. It's unlikely you can hire anyone off the street and build it in a year. It's just not going to happen. So if you're not doing that now and already on the journey, that's the place to start, because then everything else flows through.
I guess that's that conversation, working on the business, not in the business, and just putting yourself in a position to scale. Yeah, and I've always been a big advocate of that. Is work hard, lead by example, be the driving force, get your hands dirty, be on the front line with the business, but also you need to then, once everyone else is up to speed, you need to step back and you need to let them make mistakes. And I always say to my team, I want you to make as many mistakes as you possibly can, as quickly as possible, and preferably learn from them and don't make the same mistake again. But it's that trust piece, isn't it? You need to. I sometimes just close my eyes and I walk away, and I don't. I don't want to watch them do it, because sometimes it will be a car crash, but that's fine, because they will learn, hopefully, and through that mistake and the learning, that'll make them stronger and a stronger leadership. And you know what? There's very few things that are really that catastrophic. There's a few bumps and hurdles. Nothing's really that critical if it goes wrong, right? And nothing's life and death in this business.
100%. And I think what stops us a lot of the time, apart from our identity, and we do it so long that it just becomes habit and we don't think about it. Best way to break that is actually get outside help. And especially for a lot of the lot of roles in the MSP, like service management and finance, us as the owners don't actually know what good looks like in a lot of those areas. We think we do. Like we know what good looks like in our business for where we're up to from what we know from our viewpoint. But that doesn't translate into other people being able to do it successfully. So actually going out there and getting help and support, whether it's through peer groups or coaching or just education and courses, really sparks not just the transformation of the business, but it gives those leaders actual ownership. Because the problem in most small businesses, and I've been guilty of this, I'm not perfect. It's when you're the small business owner and you've done it and grown the business from your hard work, there's always going to be this gap of, this is how I want it to be done and do it my way because this is how we got it, to what actually translates to other people being able to take it and, most importantly, own it. Because if you don't create ownership with the leaders, it always comes back to you every time, because it's like, well, this is how you want it done. This is how it's always been. I'm not going to question it because you're the ultimate authority. But if you've got this outside education, you're empowering them to actually build and touch and feel, then they'll own it and they'll run with it.
Yeah, it's really true. And in my former life, I had an executive coach that I would work with and get advice, and it's so valuable to get an independent third-party perspective, which is guiding and coaching you from often a point of experience, and they've done this before. But it's also good just to be able to have a therapy session and just be able to get those thoughts out of your head in a, sometimes they may be negative, but get them out to someone outside of the business, so you're not actually spoiling the culture within the business. And a problem shared is a problem halved is often what they say. So being able to work with someone, and again, that's most likely why your business with the C-level coaching is taken off and is doing really well, because you're actually able to help be that second set of eyes, and not just a counselor at times, but also being able to give them the coaching on how they can tweak and optimize, and coming from a place of experience. So it's good.
It makes a big difference to know what good looks like. This has been the problem down in our part of the world, is we've never really seen the detail of what good looks like. We hear a lot of the thought leadership from the US, which is great. We get excited by going to a conference and hear this, we can do this great stuff, but there's never any substance behind it. So it's up to us to translate that and unpack the theory into concepts. And most of us in the MSP space aren't theoretical thinkers. We're practical, touch and feel. We need to see the substance and the detail to unpack. So it's been exciting for me to be involved in sharing what good looks like and help people and shape the next level leaders, because that's what's going to drive the industry forward. And like we just said, that's what's going to give business owners more business value and successful exits. I think what's important to drive value as well is from that leadership team is a lot of the process and procedure and standardization. A lot of MSPs don't realize how unstandardized they are. I was trying to think of the right word, but I will ask someone, well, tell me about your managed services plans, and they will always tell me, we've got this one standardized package. This is what we provide new clients. And when I push harder and scratch past the surface, I will get, but this client has this, this client's on this package, and it starts to break down because actually there's no standardization across what we're providing our clients and what they've got. And that's a value thing, because all of a sudden you can't represent what you're actually providing to the clients. As a buyer, I don't know what risk I'm taking on. And that flows into our contracts. A lot of MSPs don't have contracts at all. and then they don't have a time contracted period. So most MSPs aren't locking people in for 12, 24, 36 months. And that is a key driver for business valuations, because if that recurring service is locked in for 36 months, that's a much higher value than a 12-month or something that's month to month, because the party buying you has more guarantee of the return on investment. And for a lot of MSPs, that's very scary and difficult to go to their client base and sort that out.
It's a good point, because I'm seeing a lot of and hearing a lot of, I call it B2C and dial up, dial down coming into the B2B world, and contracts, customers don't want that commitment, etc. And a lot of partners are moving to, we're just month to month. If you want, just leave us. And then I've spoken to other partners who say, look, it's a 3-month contract, but if you do need to get out for a reasonable reason, then we'll let you out. But what is the happy medium, and how can an MSP position that contract to effectively get them committed for a business relationship, for not just a one-off transaction, but also put themselves in a position where, and their customers in a position where they don't feel that they're necessarily locked in. Have you got any tips on that?
I like when I talk to owners a lot of the time, I ask them, well, how long have the clients been there with you? And the majority of MSPs, the majority of their client base have been with them 5+ years anyway. They're already committed. So it's not really about the commitment part. It's more about fear of from the MSP owner of being able to sell the value of committing. So a lot of what the more mature MSPs are doing with those contracts are giving better pricing for the ones that lock in for 3 years. There's a value on being able to lock that in and commitment wise. So it's a give and take. The contracts.
And is that value in a pricing piece of value? Is it a discount? If you lock in for 3 years, you get a marginal discount?
Typically the marginal discount, and the fact that price rises are locked to CPI, where it's a lot more. That could increase quite a lot in 12 months. We could say we're charging $10 more a seat, kind of thing. So it gives the clients budgeting and consistency and clarity of what they're going to spend for the next 3 years. So not only do they get a discount, but they also know how much they're going to pay, which is a big thing. When if I'm running a business and I'm budgeting, it's nice to know this is how much I'm going to pay, and that's it.
And in that situation, if you're putting a fixed fee contract in place, say it's $150 per month, if an MSP is exposed to price increases from the vendor, for example, Microsoft NCE has bumped the prices up a little bit, would you expect that the MSP should eat that cost because they put into the contract, or is there a caveat that says if Microsoft bump it up, they're going to bump it up as well?
That's the interesting part here. It depends on how you're packaging as well. So most MSPs are going the wrong way, in my opinion, around just bundling everything up into this one ethereal price with no details, because that is exposing us to more of those sort of risks, as those parties can just up our cost by 30% overnight. What choice do we have at that point? So it depends how you're then selling it. Are we just selling the managed services for 3 years, or are we locking them into all these other services at that kind of rate, and the products that are included in that as well? So there's quite a bit to think about with our product and packaging. And one thing we're not talking about it yet is the security component of these contracts. So these sort of month to month, and we don't really have terms and conditions and contracts. That's a huge risk in this day and age for a buyer, but also for the MSPs now that are operating without that, because we're not protecting us or the client, because we're not clearly outlining what do we do and we don't do, and what are we contracted to actually provide, and what's our responsibility. If we don't have that, we're very much exposed, and that adds to that lower value as well.
So, and thank you for that. That's really good to know. My next question is, in the eyes of an investor, let's just say that I'm an investor. I want to be looking at either merging my company with another one, or acquiring a company, or buying or investing in a particular organization for one reason or another. What are the levers that are important to me, and what should if I'm a seller, what should I be really trying to put in place today to make myself more attractive to that investor, and to hopefully get an extra couple points from that?
I think that's a
exit.
very great term to use, is investor. So there's a lot of MSP owners at the moment that are sort of stuck in their growth, and seeing that M&A is sort of the magic answer of, oh, let's go buy somebody else. But they've got no real strategy around it, which is really dangerous, because how do you know you're going to get any return on investment? You're going to default to gut feel emotions of, oh, this is going to feel great. This feels great, so this is going to make me lots of money. And we all, by default, think 1 + 1 = 2. Or some of us delude ourselves into 1 + 1 = 3. That's often what the immature acquisitions are like. And it's never really like that, especially on our first time. 1 + 1 probably equals 1.5 to 1.8 a lot of the time, because we've got to learn a lot of these mistakes. So the buyer or the investor needs to have a strategy, and there's a few strategies there that some of the successful MSPs that are running around are doing. One of them is they're just acquiring to generate revenue so they can sell to a bigger party. So you've got to know in all of this who's going to buy you, and what their strategy is. So if they're just buying you to grow and sell to somebody else, they're less likely to worry about a lot of details at that point. They just want the least amount of effort to get you on board, and as fast as possible. Solves a lot of those problems. Most of the
And just on that, and again, this could be a really varied response here, but in that particular example, in that use case of you buying your business to then absorb into mine and flip on to someone else, is there a common set of objectives that sort of buyer would be looking for? Is it a database? Is it a skill set?
It's typically the recurring revenue. It's just a lot of the time they're just looking at revenue, so that they can bolt on the revenue on top, so that they're in a bigger scale. They might be
It's getting that bigger enterprise value as they begin to increase their overall group revenue.
That's where like these we just spoke about multiples very early on. Like that's where these multiples start coming into play around. It's based on some of the revenue sizes and business sizes. The bigger you are, the multiples often go up. So being able to skip into a different tier can make a big difference. It hasn't been happening that much, but it's starting to, that I'm seeing this sort of play. The other play is expanding strategically into another city, because we know, especially down in our part of the world, that you can hit a market cap in one of the major metros, and especially if you've got a niche, the obvious one is then to go, well, I'm in Melbourne, I'll go to Sydney now, and expand out. So they'll be looking for a particular business that fits their industry verticals and what they deliver, so it's more technically aligned. So knowing what you do as an MSP to sell, like if you've got a specific niche, what you should be looking for is the buyers that would want to buy you to expand into the city, or they want to expand their market cap of that particular industry. The other ones are just sort of looking for talent as well. Like they just want to, they're a horizontal MSP. They just want to grow their current business. They want to hire the talent from that business. You might have a specialty in technology that might bolt on. And other large, what I've seen from a lot of other larger MSPs is being able to buy the MSP, get some techs, which is fantastic, get a client base, but get the client base that they can cross-sell into. So they can see the return on investment isn't just from getting that client base as it is currently now, it's that they can add more and more services into that base and they'll get that revenue. So what's important out of all of this is really to understand what the strategy of the buyers are, where your position is and be able to position into some strategic cells, because that's where you're going to get better value, but it's also going to be the most successful integration as well. And especially if you're on a buyout period and you've got warranties that you have to meet, you want it to be successful so you actually get the money. Where if you just go into any old MSP, and it could fall apart. And I've seen those things fall apart, and people miss out because of that.
So recurring revenue contracts is what I'm picking up. Being an expert, maybe a technology expert, maybe it's a networking expert, security expert, having a skill set that is rare, maybe doubling down on that. Anything else that pops up to mind?
You've got to be really aware of what tool sets and stuff you're using as well, of what the buyer wants to rip out. Because if you're doing really funky, weird stuff that isn't industry norm, it can be very difficult to unravel. If I'm an operations manager of the company that's buying it, I want as least amount of friction of bringing on the employees, because that's the risk. If I have to change a crap ton of systems and the way you're doing things into our way, because that's what's going to happen. You're going to go from your business into whatever my business is. You'd be following what I say is the best way to run. If there's too much of a gap of that, I'll probably walk away, because there's too much risk. So if you're knowing your potential strategic buyers and knowing what they run and operate, copying them in their operations is a good way to go, well, actually, we're really attractive. This is going to be a lot easier than other businesses.
And as you're talking, I'm thinking, I say in the eyes of an investor, what's worth more, and this is how we should be thinking, is it's a bidding war. It's just a game of supply and demand. And if you are very attractive, then you're going to have more people bidding for you, and therefore you're going to drive the price up a little bit more. And so standardization of tech stack, or there's a lot of the printers, copiers coming in, or there's the large SIs coming down. So maybe you've got to standardize tech best of breed MSP solutions. You got MSP contracts, 3-year contracts. You're a specialist in cybersecurity. And you've got a decent database. I mean, I know I'm asking for the holy grail just there, but if you had all of that, then you'd be incredibly attractive in the market. But I guess it's just really, if you're a generalist, you've got some generic tools. You're not standardized. Don't have a lot of contracts in place. Is start to think about like one of those areas, and maybe put a time frame in place and say, cool, well, we'd like to retire or begin to exit within 3 years. Let's put some milestones in place. By 12 months, let's have some standardized tech. By 24 months, let's have 50% of our clients on recurring revenue and half of them on contracts.
From that, knowing all those pieces, if you're interested in selling in 3 years' time or 5 years' time, whatever it is, you need to start talking to people now. People think, we just wait until we're ready to sell, and then that's when you start talking, and we'll get a deal done very quickly. You need to be out in the market, talking to people about and finding out about all these different buyers and the strategies, and build the relationships, so that when you are ready to get to that point of selling, you already know a lot of the information. You've already been working towards, and then starting the deal conversations are a lot easier than starting cold. We just seem to think that we can just put our hand up quietly and go, I'm ready to sell, and then people just line up to buy us. And that's just not how it is. You have to treat this as the biggest sell that you've ever done. This is the biggest deal that you're ever going to do, and you've got to be very strategic about it and put the effort in. And when you're in this process, this is where I spoke about the mentally ready. Due diligence is hard, and you need a good solid business, because you'll get distracted from it. It will become your life when you're going through the deal process to actually do it. So you need to start now.
And I guess get some support if you become fatigued. You feel like you're on a hamster wheel going round and round. Is go and have a conversation. Like your team are having these sort of conversations on a regular basis, whether with the Pax8 Academy or the C-level operations guys or elsewhere, or some sort of executive coach or someone that can be a second set of eyes and just relieve some of that mental burden on you. Would strongly encourage that if you do feel like you're getting fatigued. So awesome. Any final thoughts before we close out, James?
I think really for this to be successful, you've got to be deliberate. If if you're not deliberate, you're always going to get the worst outcomes out of this. You're just relying on luck at that point. We've worked so hard for so long in our MSPs that I genuinely want to see the founding generation of this industry go out successfully, because they've set up a lot of good things and they've helped a lot of people over time and sacrificed a lot. That it is important to get a decent sale and exit, but you've got to be deliberate, and each person has different outcomes and needs and wants and expectations, and you've got to understand that for yourself and then be able to work through that. And like you said, get help. Like even just getting involved in the communities. There's so many people out there that have been there and done that and are happy to talk through it at presentations and that conferences and things like that, as the dog attacks me, that we're sharing community. So just get out involved and help and give back as well.
Yep, absolutely. And speaking of which, I'm at the Kaseya, I was going to say Kaseya and Data, but it's a Kaseya conference right now in my hotel room, and just spent the last few days chatting with lots of MSPs from around the APAC